Oh, goody.
Alright, what's going on everybody? Zombies here again, and today we're back with another Marble Snap video. So today we're taking a look at tonight's new card, the first drop of the Spider-Verse season outside of the season pass, and that is Silk. Silk is a 2-cost 5 power with the text, after any card is played here, this moves to another location. So this is a card I've been pretty excited about for a while. I think highly statted 2-drops or cheap cards in general with an interesting kind of downside are super cool. This is definitely my type of card, and it's one I've been excited for a pretty long time since it was data mined many months ago. But is this a card that is worth your tokens? Because Silk is the only card releasing in Series 5 this month of the new cards releasing. Obviously Nebula, still a Series 5 card because it just rotated out of the pass. But Silk is the only one of the Spider-Verse cards that is actually dropping in Series 5 this month. Spider-Ham and 2099 will both be Series 4 drops. So that poses kind of an interesting question of, do I want to buy Silk or do I want to wait and maybe get both of those other new cards instead? And to me, if I really had to pick, I probably would pick Silk, just because I think this card has the most potential out of all the cards releasing this month, basically. A 2/5 is really good. The effect is very, very powerful with some of the other move cards, and I think it's going to be a mainstay in Sera control, as when you have that Sera reduction, use a 1/5, and if you do not have priority, you can mitigate the effect, so you don't have to worry about her bouncing around if you do not want her to. For that reason, I think this is going to be a pretty powerful card, and looking at how Second Dinner has been doing things with the series drops, it would not be surprising to me at all if the reason they picked this card starting as the only Series 5 card this month is because they know that it's probably the most powerful, as unfortunate as that is. But yeah, I think this is one that's probably going to be worth it. Generally, my advice though is if you're a little bit on the fence, I think the best thing to do is to not rush into it, give it a few days, see how the card is going, because a lot of times cards can get overhyped, people are excited about it, and things don't always work out, in reality, playing the game with the card as they do when you're kind of theory crafting it. But I do think this one does have a lot of potential, and we've got some really cool decks to look at for it. So we're going to dive right on into those, but basically, if you are interested in this card at all, I think it's probably worth, but if you're not totally sure, give it a few days, see how the initial results are looking, as well as any possible balance changes we might be getting in the upcoming monthly patch. So let's dive into it and take a look at some decks for Silk, starting off with Move Wave. So this is a slightly different variation on the deck I used to get to Infinite this month. It was a little bit of a shorter climb due to the recent bug with the rank resetting. Nonetheless, this deck did really, really well for me. I did make a few tweaks for this version. Basically tried to find space for Human Torch, who was previously Nebula, as well as adding Silk in over Doctor Strange. But this was originally Moyen's list, and he is, in my opinion, one of the best players in the game right now. And I really like what this list has going for it. The main thing about it is the fact that we have a lot of powerful things we can be doing on turn 5 with Wave. So we wave and follow it up a lot of times with a 2-drop, though we can also play some cost-reduced cards like our Miles Morales. But generally, you're just trying to slam an impactful 2-drop and wave on turn 5. So that way we are really limiting the opponent's strategy, and that helps us kind of almost auto-win against decks that are trying to spam out a lot of cards, like the popular Kitty Bounce deck, as well as Sera Control with Hitmonkey. So Wave really helps keep those style of decks in check, and given that those are some of the better decks out there right now, definitely pretty effective at shutting them down. We have some powerful things we can do at the end of the game. I like Dr. Doom in this list quite a lot, and that is because it gives us a way to go wide. When everyone sees you're playing a move deck, a lot of the times they're expecting Heimdall, so people kind of play around that very specifically, and this gives you an option to where you can just slam Doom and catch people off guard when they're not really expecting it, especially given the fact that we can generate a pretty large amount of power with a lot of our move cards here. So oftentimes we will be ahead, and given the fact that Dr. Doom is one of the more popular 6-drops in the game right now, being able to close out with our own Doom to basically put out the same power as an opponent's Doom while we're ahead, just is going to close up the game for us. Craven is really the big one with Silk, where Silk's going to be moving around a bunch, and that synergy is going to be particularly powerful with Craven, who gets a benefit whenever she ends up moving over to his location, as well as all the other move packages we have here with things like Iron Fist, Ghost Spider, Heimdall, etc. But yeah, this is definitely a pretty solid way to go if you want to go with a move style deck, but still be able to respect some of the more popular meta players like Sera and Bounce. Speaking of Sera, that's the next deck we have on our list here, and I think Sera is really, really well positioned right now. So I opted to go with a fairly standard version of Sera Control. The one thing I'm still debating a little bit is if Enchantress is really needed or not. It's going to depend on how much ongoing there is around. But right now, Shang-Chi and Killmonger have felt a bit like the more important tech cards. So if you do want to make this deck a little bit lighter on the curve with less top end, Enchantress might be a card you could consider cutting if you want to sneak in another 2-drop, so you can play a whole lot of 2-drops at the end of the game to really benefit our cards in here like Bishop and Hitmonkey, though Enchantress can still be useful, so I did justify her being included here. But nonetheless, basically, Sera Control, not much to say. It does what Sera Control does, and it's one of the best things that Silk can take advantage of because we don't have to worry about her downside as much. Another interesting interaction here is we don't necessarily have to wait to the end of the game to play her, because we can play her into an Angela lane, and then if we're ever concerned about Silk accidentally clogging up a lane for us, we can always try and put Jeff in that lane, who's already good in an Angela lane, because then if Silk happens to pop back into the Angela lane, we can always move Jeff out to free up the spot and then get her moving again. And at that point, the Angela will probably be pumped up large enough to where the opponent's going to have to abandon that lane. But this definitely helps with the kind of direction Sera was already trending in post Kitty Pryde, which is, yes, it's a control deck. Yes, it's trying to counter the stuff you're doing, but like kind of the new age Sera here is very capable of putting out a lot of power itself. And that's kind of what made the deck, I think, a lot better, is the fact that not only can we deal with the opponent's big threats, but we can put out some big threats of our own if we don't happen to draw the particular tech card we need for the matchup we're playing against. So I really like that. There are definitely a few different ways you can build this, but this is the one I'm planning on trying out. Sera Control has been a solid deck forever, and Silk seems just like a very natural inclusion to give it some more good stats on the final turn. Then we have our full movement deck. So this is one where I'm by no means a move expert. It's actually probably the deck archetype I've played the least of in Snap. I've always liked smaller move packages, but with Silk, figure, you know, there are going to be a lot of move enjoyers out there, so we do a all-in move deck. I think generally this is probably going to be inferior to the wave version, as the wave version really helps check some of the better decks out there right now, whereas this version doesn't do that quite as effectively, unfortunately. But we're just jamming a lot of the move cards in here. I did try and find space for Human Torch, but I kind of valued the cards that move the opponent stuff a little bit, because that allows us to kind of control the flow of the game sometimes. Juggernaut can be particularly handy towards the end of the game sometimes too, or just if your opponent has been filling up some of their lanes, you know they're not going to play there because they want to leave one spot open, you can just Juggernaut them into a lane so it's closed up. I think that can be very handy, and it has a chance of buffing up our Craven, which is always nice. But if you really like the all-in style of move stuff, but you value kind of controlling your opponent's positioning a little bit as well, this is the one I would be trying out. Then we have our Tempo Stature Black Bolt Darkhawk deck. So this is a deck that it's really fallen off pretty heavily in popularity, but it hasn't fallen off so heavily in win rate. I've actually played quite a bit with Stature Black Bolt recently after the changes to the cards, and I've got to say, people have moved away from this archetype way too quickly. It still does some very powerful things, and I think it is really underrepresented in the meta. So this is a list all about doing some rock disruption, hand disruption, while making some pretty big stats on the board, which is something Silk naturally helps with. Just getting a 5 power for 2 cost is really good. Mr. Fantastic is a cool inclusion here because I wanted some kind of 3-drop, and Fantastic's nice because even if we're having trouble controlling exactly where Silk ends up going, it might not end up mattering as much if we have that Mr. Fantastic buff and the opponent isn't able to easily tell which 2 lanes we're trying to win, with Silk bouncing everywhere and Fantastic spreading the power around. Obviously, we have all the Darkhawk package stuff. We're running Shang-Chi as a bit of removal in case the opponent tries to go taller than us. But basically, you're just trying to slam down your threats on curve, slam Black Bolt on 5, and then get a lot of stuff into play on the final turn. Stature, really still a powerful card, especially with Miles Morales. You can get both of these to 1 cost on the final turn. You can play quite a lot of stuff. And with Silk, we now have a bit more of a consistent way of enabling Miles. Previously, we've been using things like Jeff, we've been using Polaris, who I ended up cutting from this list, but could be a reasonable inclusion depending on your preference. Obviously, Zabu here to reduce the cost of our 4 cost, which, while there are only 4 of them, that does help this deck out a lot, especially not only in curving out, but in the situations where we don't get Black Bolt on time and we just want to play 2 4-drops on the final turn. And then we just have some good cards to fill out the curb. Nebula, which the opponents generally have to respect, or she can take over a lane all on her own. And Jeff for that bit of added flexibility. And to close it out, we're taking a look at a little bit more of a meme deck, but one that I think will be quite a bit of fun to play, and that is Cerebro 5. So it's been a long time since I've revisited a Cerebro deck. I actually did play a bit of Cerebro 5 a couple months ago when they buffed, I don't remember which card, they buffed something to 5, maybe it was Negasonic or the Enchantress change, but there were some new options for Cerebro 5, so I tried it out. It was actually kind of cool with Nimrod, being able to blow up the Nimrod. Now that Negasonic's buffed up, we can kind of justify running her in this deck. We can use her to play out, blow up the Nimrod, blow it up again with Deathlock, which is kind of cool. We have 0 here because, truthfully, our 5 power stuff is a little bit limited. You could also obviously consider Miles in this deck over the Rock Slide slot or the Enchantress slot. I opted to go with a bit of kind of control and disruption here, but if we're going to be having Silk move around, maybe Miles could also be worth consideration. But we just are including most of the good 5 power cards. 0 is really nice in this deck too, though, because we do have some with downside, so being able to cancel out that negative Titania effect or negative Lizard effect can be very beneficial. We could even use it on Silk if you want to just tempo out the 0 and don't have to worry about her moving around all the time. But yeah, this definitely in the less proven camp, but if you're looking for something fun and a bit more on the memey side to try out, Cerebro 5 has you covered. There we have it. Those are day 1 decks we're going to be checking out for Silk here. I'll have a link in the description to the decks if you want to import any of those in game, but I'd love to hear from you. What do you think about Silk? Is it a card you're excited to be picking up, or are you going to be holding off because you have more interest in some of the other cards that are releasing later this month for a bit less expensive token cost? Let me know in the comments below, but that's going to wrap it up for this one. If you want to check out some games with Silk, I'll be streaming with her later tonight as she releases. I'll link in the description below to that. But that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you enjoyed it, remember to like and subscribe, and I'll catch you in the next one. Peace.